Today I'd like to introduce you to a roundtable on how to value your business or valuing a business. It's been in the news that Twitter in 2009 took a round of funding on a valuation of $1 billion, and that was at a time when the revenue was considered tiny. In the same year, eBay sold Skype for less than they paid for it in 2003, and in Australia towards the end of 2009, fineababysitter.com.au was sold to Fairfax Digital for a reported sum of $3 million. With me today to talk about how to value a business from two sides of the coin, the entrepreneur side and then the number crunching accountant side. And welcome first to Scott Kilmartin, founder of online and offline urban streetwear and design business Haul. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Fiona.
Welcome also to Gary Graco, who has spent decades in the number crunching side of this and helping businesses to get ready for sale and to put the right kind of valuation on the business. Gary is from Nexia ASR. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Fiona.
And David Eedle, who, as you know, is the author of Niche Content Millionaire, co-founder of Arts Hub, which has achieved an exit, and co-author of Into the Mountain blog. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Fiona.
Firstly, maybe, Gary, I can ask you, that $1 billion valuation on Twitter that came up last year, you're someone who's worked with bricks and mortar businesses that have taken, in some cases, some time to build asset value. What do you make of that sort of valuation on little revenue?
It's probably fair to say that it represents a whole new regime in what people perceive is value and profitability out of the online space. It's really taken the concept of Google and saying this is now a much wider concept because it's delivered through a different medium, and the ability to generate, whether it be advertising, subscriptions or whatever. In terms of a valuation principle, who knows? It's purely a case of what people's perceptions are in terms of what they can do with it. And if you go back to I'll call it the early days, the late 90s and early 2000s, of when there was this mad scramble to get into what was an internet space, and there are all sorts of cases as to how we can take this and develop it on the internet, and suddenly the world's open to us. And it's probably fair to say that less than 2 or 3% of those ideas actually have turned into sustainable businesses. Some of them really, really successful. Some of them still managing to wash their face. Twitter is, I don't know. I really don't know where it's worth $1 billion, but if you go back 5 or 6 years or 7 years and someone would have said, look, Google, in fact it's probably longer than that, Google is going to be a multi-billion dollar organisation, potentially one day outstrip Microsoft. You would have, no, how? But that's the reality. They've managed to actually find a number of ways of generating revenue out of their business model, and Twitter may do the same. And I think that's the thing, is that everyone's got an idea of what they can do on Twitter. It's a matter of what's going to work and what's not.
Okay, Scott, you're an entrepreneur, your business has been around for 10 years, you're deeply wedded to it. What do you value in your business, and how do you value it at the current time?
Yeah, it's a really tricky question. It's one that's probably every 6 months or so I don't really calendar it or diarise it to go, I've got to work this out, but kind of something pops into my head, or there'll be a big sale of some kind, and I'll think, what's Haul worth right now? And it is a bit of that kind of throwing darts into the air and hoping you hit a dartboard, and then is the magical number that I'm thinking I've hit even close to it. So much of it's hypothetical, especially because I think the businesses that I have a look at, they generally, you see values come up. If a business gets a lot of hype in the first 6 months to 18 months or so, then people quickly put values on them. The businesses that are after that, maybe 2 years through 4 or 5 years, almost go off the radar and become less novel or topical, and the valuation issue doesn't really come up unless there's potential for a sale or there's talk of sharks swarming that are cashed up that want to buy it. So I'm definitely in that latter category of the business has been around for a while. It was a hobby a sideline, then it became really a business, if you like. We're still definitely a boutique business, but 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm, as you mentioned, so I guess emotionally tied because I've been in that long haul, no pun intended, for 10 years. I'm probably the last person to ask because I'd probably argue with any hardcore number cruncher's view of it, which would be, I reckon, a relatively low number. But obviously, as an entrepreneur, you're a very positive person. You see the blue sky, and I see potential of what it could become. I guess it is one of those ones where a business like mine right now, it's almost an irrelevant point, I guess, for me, because I have wasted a bit of headspace and time going, what's it worth? And you go through the ratios of this times earnings, and it's a really tough space to figure it out. So, I guess in a really roundabout way, I try and avoid the question because, one, I'm not looking to sell it, and as the sole, I guess, shareholder, it's really only kind of headspace time for me. So it's a tricky one. I've got some friends who've got some businesses that have definitely raised some capital, and there's an exit with a view, they're viewing an exit somewhere down the track. And there's, I guess, a couple of multiple ways of doing that. And for those guys talking about their business, it's a day-to-day reality, and critical to what they're going to do with their future and what's going to happen in the business of their future. So being in on some of those kind of conversations has been interesting. But again, even those guys that have raised money, that have got, I guess, experienced either high net worth individuals or venture capitalists involved, there's still a lot of plucking. Unless they're seen as a rapidly growth industry or someone wants that asset.
Would you agree with that, Gary? There's a lot of plucking and involved.
Look, there is until you actually test the market. It is really just a theoretical exercise. We go through the process and it becomes a best judgment based upon what other activity is around in the market. But I've been involved with a number of businesses in the software and, to a lesser extent, the online space. And it really defies some of the traditional valuation logic because at the end of the day, it's what the person buying sees as the value. And a lot of the software businesses, it's about bolt-on. How can we bolt this software onto it? Or alternatively, it's something that we can actually put through our distribution channel. So it becomes very much their returns and paybacks happen very quickly, so they're prepared to pay what you might perceive as over the odds, because their measurements, whether it be internal rate of return or whatever, are so high they can afford to get away with paying what I see as over the odds.